The sun beat down on the shimmering turquoise waters of the Caribbean, a deceptive serenity that masked the brutal realities of life on the high seas. Aboard the Serpent's Kiss, a sleek and deadly galleon, the atmosphere was thick with the sweat of labor and the scent of salt and tar. Captain Elias Thorne, a man whose face was a map of storms and weathered regrets, stood at the helm, his hand gripping the polished wood like a lifeline. Approaching 50, his once fiery red hair was now a tangled mass of grey and sun-bleached white, and the lines around his eyes were etched deep from decades of squinting into the blinding sun. He was a legend among pirates, not for his cruelty, but for his uncanny ability to outsmart and outmaneuver the navies of a dozen nations. Yet, for all his wealth and reputation, he was a solitary figure, a man who had long ago traded the softness of companionship for the unforgiving embrace of the ocean. His crew, a rough-and-tumble lot of hardened sailors, understood their captain's nature. They respected him, but they also saw the loneliness in his eyes. Elias had seen too many good men and women lost to the sea or the gallows to ever let himself grow close to anyone again. It was a self-imposed prison, a fortress of solitude built to protect a heart that had been broken one too many times. One blistering afternoon, the lookout spotted a Spanish merchant vessel, fat with cargo and sailing with a lazy escort. The crew's morale, already low from a string of uneventful weeks, surged. A chase ensued, a brutal ballet of cannon fire and splintered wood. They overtook the merchant ship with their usual efficiency, and as they swarmed the deck, the air was filled with the shouts of combat and the clang of steel. Elias, leading from the front, saw to the capture himself. The prize was rich, silks, spices, and a chest full of silver. But as the crew began to celebrate, a younger, cocky pirate named Finn, his face a mask of triumph, approached Elias with something else entirely. "Captain," Finn said, his voice laced with a mixture of reverence and defiance, "we found something special, a forbidden gift for you." He gestured to the open door of the ship's cramped captain's quarters. Inside, huddled in a corner, was a young woman. Her hands were bound, but her posture was straight and proud, her dark eyes filled with a furious defiance. Her dress, though rumpled, was of fine Spanish silk, and her black hair was a cascade of curls. She was not a prize to be taken, but a person to be respected, a fact that seemed lost on Finn and the rest of the crew. Elias's blood ran cold. He had a strict code. No innocent women were to be harmed or taken. He had thought his crew understood this, but their desperate attempt to alleviate his loneliness had led them to a dangerous violation of his rules. He saw the look in their eyes, a mix of misguided affection and lecherous intent. The woman was not a gift. She was a burden, a ticking time bomb of conflict and temptation. "You fool!" Elias snarled, his voice a low growl that silenced the raucous cheers of his men. "What have you done?" Finn's face fell. "Captain, we thought, you've been alone for so long. She's the daughter of a nobleman, a treasure more valuable than gold." "She is a person, not a possession," Elias shot back, his rage burning through the heat of the day. He pushed past Finn and entered the cabin, the heavy scent of plunder mixing with the delicate perfume of the young woman. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a fear she fought to conceal. "Who are you?" she demanded, in perfect though accented English. "And what do you want with me?" Elias knelt before her, and with a swift motion he cut the ropes on her wrists. "My name is Captain Thorne," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "and I don't want anything from you. My crew made a mistake. A grave one." He stood, the cabin feeling impossibly small. He was a man accustomed to the vast, open sea, and now he was trapped in a tiny room with a fiery captive and a mutinous crew. "I will take you back to my ship," he said, his voice firm. and figure out what to do with you. But know this, no harm will come to you while you are under my protection." She looked at him, suspicion still clouding her face, but a flicker of something else. Relief, perhaps, or a hesitant curiosity, danced in her dark eyes. This man, this legendary pirate, was not what she had been led to believe. And Elias, looking at her, felt a tremor of something he hadn't felt in years. A responsibility not just for a ship and a crew, but for a life he had unexpectedly saved. A life that was now bound to his in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The journey back to the Serpent's Kiss was short but tense. Elias had to physically separate a defiant Finn from the young woman, a public show of authority that left the crew grumbling. Back on his ship, he locked her in his cabin, a space that was both his sanctuary and his prison. He felt a profound sense of unease. Not only was he housing an unwilling captive, but he was also facing the simmering resentment of his own men. The delicate balance of power he had maintained for years was now at risk, all for a woman he didn't even know. He found her huddled in a corner, her back to the cabin's single small window. The afternoon sun filtered through the glass, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "My name is Elena," she said, her voice softer this time, but still defiant. "Elena de Valencia. My father is Don Ricardo, a governor in Havana. You have made a powerful enemy." Elias leaned against his desk, the wood groaning under his weight. "Your father's power means nothing out here, miss. The sea cares not for titles, nor do I." He paused, studying her face. "Why were you on that ship?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the cabin door. "I was being taken to Portobello for a political arrangement, to be married to a man I have never met, a man my father owed a favor to." Her voice cracked with a bitterness he recognized. It was the sound of a person who had lost all control over her own life. Elias felt an unexpected wave of empathy. He too had once felt like a pawn in a larger game, a young sailor bound by duty and expectation. "I understand," he said, and the words, so rarely spoken by him, sounded strange and alien. "You were not free." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "And now I am a prisoner of a pirate. Is that freedom?" "I am not a jailer," Elias replied, a hint of anger in his voice. "I am protecting you from my crew, who see you as a prize to be sold. I will not have it." For the next few days, their relationship was a delicate dance of mistrust and growing understanding. Elias would bring her food and water, their conversations short and guarded. He would stand watch over the door while she slept, the rhythmic creak of the ship's timbers the only sound in the dead of night. He began to see beyond the silk dress and the defiant glare. He saw a young woman of fierce intelligence and a spirit that refused to be broken, no matter her circumstances. He found himself thinking about her when he was on deck, the memory of her proud posture and sharp wit a constant companion. The brewing storm of their emotional connection was soon mirrored by the fury of the sea. A squall, fast and brutal, descended upon them. The sky turned a sickly grey-green, and the wind howled like a banshee. The Serpent's Kiss was a toy in the hands of the ocean, tossed and battered by titanic waves. A sudden violent lurch sent Elias's desk crashing against the cabin door. He rushed to it, only to find the storm had ripped the hinges from the frame. He turned to find Elena, her face pale with terror, about to be thrown from her feet. Without thinking, he grabbed her, his arms a strong shield against the ship's furious rocking. They stumbled and fell together, his body a bulwark against the forces of the storm. The wind screamed through the broken door, and rain lashed at them. But for a moment they were an island of stillness in the chaos. His arms held her fast, and he could feel the frantic beat of her heart against his chest. She looked up at him, her eyes no longer filled with fear, but with an unexpected trust. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible over the gale. Elias did not answer, his mind reeling. In his decades at sea, he had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. He was supposed to be a hardened pirate, a man of iron will. But in the midst of the storm, with this woman in his arms, he felt a fissure open in the fortress he had built around his heart. He wasn't just protecting her from his crew, he was protecting her from the world, and in doing so, he was finally allowing himself to be vulnerable to her. As the ship groaned and shuddered, a new alliance was forged, not of convenience or force, but of shared terror and a dawning, fragile hope. The placid calm after the storm was an illusion. Finn, his pride wounded by Elias's protectiveness of Elena, saw the crew's growing resentment. He seized the opportunity to act. One evening, under a sliver of moon, he approached Elias's cabin door with a group of disgruntled men. "Captain!" he called out, his voice sharp with insubordination. "The girl is our property, and we've had enough." Elias, who had been sitting with Elena, rose slowly. He had anticipated this. "She is not property, not anyone's," he said, his voice as cold as the deep sea. "You're getting soft, Captain," Finn sneered. "Years of loneliness has made you weak." The words were a spark to a powder keg. Elias stepped out, his quartermaster Silas, a man of quiet loyalty, at his side. A dozen men stood with Finn, their faces set in a grim defiance. It was a mutiny, a battle for the soul of the ship. The fight was swift and brutal. Cutlasses clashed against pistols, a chaotic blur of steel and blood on the deck. Elias, with the help of Silas and his loyal men, fought with a savage intensity. He wasn't fighting for treasure or glory. He was fighting for a person, for a principle. Elena, watching from the shattered cabin door, saw the transformation. The weathered old pirate was gone, replaced by a force of nature. In the midst of the chaos, Finn lunged at Elias. With a practiced motion, Elias disarmed him, holding his blade to Finn's throat. "You will not defy me again," he said, his voice a low hiss. He did not kill him, showing a clemency that spoke louder than any threat. The mutiny was over. The remaining mutineers, seeing their leader defeated, threw down their arms. As the sun rose, the crew, now humbled, began the work of cleaning the deck. They had seen their captain's strength not just in battle, but in his unwavering conviction. They had witnessed the depth of his feelings for the woman he had risked everything to protect. And in that moment, they understood. She was not a prize, but his partner. Later, Elias stood on deck, the sea breeze a cool balm on his face. Elena came to stand beside him. "You fought for me," she said quietly. "You risked your life for a stranger." "You are not a stranger," Elias replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the one thing I wasn't looking for, and now I can't imagine living without you." He turned to face her, the lines on his face softened by a vulnerability she had never expected to see. "I can take you to the next port. You can go back to your old life," he said, offering her the choice he had always been denied. "Or you can stay, not as a captive, but as my equal, my partner." Eleanor looked at the endless open sea. She looked at Elias Thorne, the man who had fought for her freedom. She was no longer a pawn or a captive. She was a woman with a choice she had fought to earn. She reached out and took his hand. "I choose the sea," she said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "I choose you." The serpent's kiss sailed on, the pirate and the nobleman's daughter standing together at the bow, two solitary souls who had found an unlikely harbor in each other. Their pasts were behind them, a turbulent wake on the endless ocean, and before them lay a new adventure, one they would face together. If you enjoyed this tale of the high seas, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of adventure, romance, and freedom.